if you want to be completely honest, I'm reading through the Minor Prophets right now with my wife in devotionals, and you want some violence, read the Minor Prophet. Read Joshua, 1st, 2nd Kings, 1st, 2nd Samuel. Like, you want some violence, read the Old Testament. God was a hothead till he had that kid, man.
Welcome to the LVL2 Podcast.
This is a monthly podcast airing on the Checkpoint Church Podcast Hub, where we feature 2 or 3 of our Level 2 members. Level 2 members are folks from within our community that have stepped up to the plate of serving Checkpoint Church rather than just being served by Checkpoint. Each episode, we're going to be tackling a central question that'll kind of shape our conversation loosely, and then we'll play a game at the end of the show. Today's topic is video games and violence. What is the deal? Why are these two things always correlated? Why is this such a corrosive topic? And we're going to break down and explore a little bit of the possibilities with some caveats here and there. But before we get into that topic any deeper, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to our 3 Level 2 members. This is a fully loaded cast we've got here today. Our 3 Level 2 members that are hanging out with us. I'm going to have them introduce themselves by their username and their real name if they choose to, and then answer our question of the day, which is, what is the one game you would pick to be stranded on a desert island with? So first, we'll start with you, Stained Glass. What's your game? And if you want to introduce yourself any further.
Yeah, I'm Stained Glass, which is short for Stained Glass Rebel. My real name is Shane. I am a pastor in the United Methodist Church, Level 2 member here at Checkpoint. And the game, I've been thinking about this, and there's so many, but if I'm being honest, based just on the number of times that I've bought it, rebought it, sold it, rebought it, Final Fantasy X. It's got to be Final Fantasy X. Probably because Blitzball will never get boring.
That's true. Just never-ending campaign. You just go from one to the next, one season of Blitzball to the next season.
Yep.
Yeah, that's amazing. All right, next up is Splash Force. Splash Force, same question. What's the one game you'd be stranded with?
All right, I'm Splash Force. I'm not going to introduce myself with my real name, but this is going to come as a surprise to nobody in the podcast. But the one game I would have on a desert island would be Minecraft.
Yeah, I was really tempted. That's not my answer. I'll say mine at the end, but I was very tempted by Minecraft. I have to admit that customization is just, it's so key. It's good stuff. All right, and now our final Level 2 member, Yeet the Boots.
Hi there, I'm Meet the Boots, Danny G, and I'm really excited. I am a layperson inside of the United Methodist Church. I work as a digital media specialist, and then I am a guardian of the galaxies for Checkpoint Church. And my game that I would pick to be stranded on a desert island, I'm gonna be honest, I'm struggling. It's either got to be League of Legends or Battlefield 2. And I guess if you're stranded on a desert island, you don't have internet, right? So Battlefront 2, yeah. Is what I'm gonna go with.
That's a real caveat we'd have to consider. Like, if you're on this island, does this island have like an active PvP?
Well, it would have to have electricity, though. I mean,
yeah,
right.
Or an endless supply of batteries.
If I have internet access, League of Legends, hands down, I can't get tired of it. I love it. It's absolutely the best game ever invented, and it is also the worst, most toxic game I think I have ever played.
Yeah, it's one of those I can't play. I played for so long. Well, not really that long, but I played for a short little stint and experienced enough of the toxicity that I'm out on it. My answer is also not going to surprise anybody here, but it is Stardew Valley. I went back and forth between Minecraft or Stardew, and I figured Stardew probably has more depth than like a Harvest Moon does. So I went with Stardew in the long run. So I want to, before we get too deep into this topic, again, we're going to be talking about video games and violence. I just wanted to set some things on the table so that anybody listening to this podcast understands what this conversation is and who we are. So again, we're Checkpoint Church. We're the church for nerds, geeks, and gamers. We are not a research facility. We are not the ADA. We are not this organization that is here to explain to you about video games and violence. We're not going to tell you about our decades of hard sociological work in the industry. We are just people. Some of us are pastors. Some of us are lay members. Some of us are not even over the age of 18. We're bringing different perspectives to this than you may have heard in other conversations. But at the end of the day, I want to make sure we're all on the same page that we are not experts on. And then I also want to explain that I think there's a difference between there's 2 ways of even looking at this conversation. And the first one is violence in video games. So are there games that have violence in them? And then on the other hand, are there games that have led to violence? And I think that's the one that's always going to be the trickier one to prove. So As far as a quick history of where this all got started, the argument could go back to even further before this, but the first place that you really will start to find any research being done is around the time of Mortal Kombat. When Mortal Kombat aired, that was a response to Street Fighter 2, but a little bit gorier, a little bit grittier, something more to it. And that led to some attention by the political figures in the United States. That led to a lot of careening forward in this conversation. And then where things really ramp up is with the Columbine shooting and the fact that the shooters were apparently linked to the video game Doom. So you have Mortal Kombat, you have Doom, and then you have games like Grand Theft Auto continuing this narrative. And then as we've continued to have one shooting after another, one tragedy after another that has happened, they all seem to be trying to find threads connecting video games to the people committing these heinous acts. For the most part, research seems to point towards the fact that these things are not even correlated in the slightest, let alone there's no correlation or causation according to the researchers out there. But again, we are not researchers. We're not going to be able to adequately provide necessarily an understanding beyond what a cursory Google might be able to provide of, well, research says this isn't the case. But we do want to kind of work through it together and work through some of the possible ways that we can see a path forward from violent video games and this perception that we have of them. So the first thing, just to lay a ground table foundation for those of us that are gathered here right now, might be to ask the question of what experience do you have with violent video games? So what is your personal gaming experience in violent games? Me personally, I'm not a shooter person, so I really don't like FPS games in general. So violence in video games, to me, is always going to be more fantastic. If I experience violence, it's going to be in the realm of an RPG. It's going to be fighting monsters. It's going to be, at most, if I'm fighting against other people, it's going to be demonstrably bad people. It's very rare that it's going to be like one military faction against another military faction for me personally, just because I don't like shooting games. I don't like the mechanics. So that's my perspective that I bring to violent video games. So who's next?
Yeah, I'll go. I have all the experience with violent video games. Yeah, so I spent probably my college tuition savings on Mortal Kombat at a corner store growing up. I remember there used to be a line of people just waiting to play, and then the person who would win would just keep control of the machine until somebody could dethrone that person. I loved Mortal Kombat when it came out. I spent so much. I don't like first-person shooters. I never have. I've been, and not because of the violence, but because I'm just terrible at them. And that's why I don't play fighters anymore. Not because I don't like them. It's just I don't have the time. As the resident old person on this pod today, I don't have the time to memorize all the movesets and all of that to make them fun. But I have never shied away from a video game because of its violence. In fact, the more violent, the more bloody, the more gory, the more insane, probably the more I've enjoyed it. That's not a universal. I've enjoyed a lot of non-dark games, but like I loved Doom. I loved Mortal Kombat. I loved all of those things. And I graduated, Columbine was 99. I graduated 97. So I was that kid, at around that time. I bring that kind of perspective to it. I don't mind it at all.
And I want to say there's a ranking of video games and the levels of violence and what they bring to the table. I think of like the only game I remember, the big deal game growing up for me in the 2000s was Manhunt. That was one that was like, this is the game that takes it too far. And there are still places that most people won't even sell that game. You can buy it online, but like a gaming store typically will just kind of throw that one out or say we can't take that one because it won't sell. So that's like the level of like excessive gore that I think some people take too far. And it almost goes down to like the torture stuff. For the most part, people aren't turned off by gore, but just like with movies, whenever it comes down to like Saw or Hostel or that kind of thing, that's where it kind of flips the switch for a lot of people from violence to excessive violence.
Interestingly, so like Grand Theft Auto,
right?
I've always hated that game, and it was due in large part because it came out right around the time when I was at my most, I'll say, religious, conservative. No, I'd say I'm a little more religious now. It was at my most restrictive in terms of what I thought should be consumed by a human. And so I may actually love the gameplay. In fact, I've played other games that are based on that kind of gameplay and have loved them. But for whatever reason, Grand Theft Auto has always been on my list of things that I just have always disliked. And I think it was because I bought into the narrative that was being told about it rather than anything it actually has to offer.
Yeah.
Well, Grand Theft Auto is just one of those games where it's either you really, really like it or, oh my God, this is so stupid. So
yeah, well, and it's leaning into the meme, right? I mean, Grand Theft Auto, I think that's why they're having so much trouble with GTA 6, and this is a side tangent, but
well, it's like 20 years old.
The reason, yeah, it's old. But the reason is also that they're not sure if their tongue-in-cheek approach is still relevant. Like, have we aged out of Grand Theft Auto's style of humor? Is a big question that I think people are asking themselves, and that these developers are asking themselves. But
yeah.
Splash,
well,
I
had a question for Stained Glass. So, like, you grew up in the 80s, 90s, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so like your experience with video games, you were probably like one of the first generations to actually play like real video games that weren't
Oregon Trail.
Oregon Trail, yeah. And like, you know, these were actually video games like Atari and like Nintendo. And I don't know if there's PC games back then. I was like 35,000 years ago.
Weren't a thing until like the late 90s.
Okay. So like, what kind of violent video game back then came out that wouldn't be considered violent today? And like, what kinds did you play?
Oh, I mean, I think Nate gave the history pretty well. Violence in video games wasn't really a conversation until Mortal Kombat came out and there was blood on the screen, right? You could make the claim that Super Mario has violence. I mean, you're killing plants and Goombas and all, you know, all kinds of stuff. There's violence in the game, but it's not a violent game. Okay. And so there's that distinction too, right? Mortal Kombat was one of the first, if not the first. It was certainly the first commercially like grand slam that had it really was because it had blood on the screen. It wasn't because they were punching each other. There wasn't because there was even the violence on it. It was the blood and the fatalities is what did it.
So before that, there wasn't any kind of like panic, you know, like how we just talked about like satanic panic. There wasn't this like video game panic that everybody's turning violent.
Just the general of that kind of media makes you stupid, or only children play that sort of thing. And at the time that was mostly true because a lot of us were kids in that generation. But yeah, the worry about it being violent was secondary to the worry about it just rotting your brain as like TV would or something like that.
All right, Danny or Splash, what's your experience with violent video games?
Well, my experience, so my parents divorced when I was 5, and I want to say about the age of like 6 or 7, like the only time I spent with my dad was playing video games. And like it was a great way for me to connect with him, and I think it's the only thing we ever connected over. And I remember the first video game that I think I ever played that was violent was Battlefield 2. It's why it's one of my favorites. I love and cherish those memories that I made with my dad for that short period of time that, you know, I was able to spend with him. You know, every Friday night, just me and him, just gaming away on Battlefront 2 or Battlefield 2. I'm never gonna remember what it is actually, Battlefront or Battlefield, but whatever. And I that opened up a whole world for me. And I remember there was one time my dad's like, hey, come over, but I have to go do this work thing. He works in like IT or whatever, and so he had like an emergency. So here I am just sitting at a PC by myself, and so I'm like, you know, I wonder if there's other better video games out there. So I go on the internet as a like 7-8-year-old, right? And I found Pirates of the Caribbean online, and I absolutely loved it. Like I just finished the first Pirates of the Caribbean, I think, and I played this game for hours and hours and hours. And I've been playing it for like a month or two. My dad started to play, and then my mom found out that I was playing all these video games with my dad, and she freaked out. And like I compared to other video games, I don't think Battlefield 2 or Pirates of the Caribbean Online were ever that violent. But the fact that I was going around killing people with swords and guns, like my mom threw a hissy fit. And so I was no longer allowed to like spend time with my dad because he had a bad negative influence on me. And like I was absolutely devastated. Although that didn't stop me from playing any more video games. I remember when League of Legends released in October of 2009, I played on that release date and I loved it. But in terms of violence, I don't think that's, you know, considered violence. And then you look at me now And then I'm playing all these different video games. And I think the most violent I play is like Valorant. And that's somewhat violent, not as violent as Call of Duty, but more violent than League of Legends. And I actually had a huge conversation with a pastor, not one that I worked for, but a different pastor in my conference over violent video games. And he was mad because I was playing Valorant. And he's like, that's going around killing people. There's blood in that game. And so we had this whole deep conversation on whether or not I'm sinning and I'm going to hell because I'm playing, these games. And
they better have Game Pass in hell.
Yes. If I'm going to hell, I'm going to throw a party. But it's going to be the best party they've ever seen. But I think that violent video games have their place in society. Everybody has a different personality, a different society, a different social economical background. I think all those factors play in. And research shows that the amount of violent video games that you play does tend to make you a little bit more aggressive. But those little bit more are very minute in terms of the other skills that these violent video games teach you. For example, they teach you coordination and hand-eye coordination, working with others, team building, all these different things. And my experience with violent video games in general has just been overall positive, I think, except for the fact that I never got to play Pirates of the Caribbean online again. Like, that sucks.
Well, what I think is really interesting about what you bring up there is that I don't know the canon reason behind League of Legends. I don't know if it's like a actual like blood sport going on and like these characters are actually dying, or if the reason that there's round after round after round is because there's something different happening in the meta. But I think that Valorant is like straight up clones, isn't it? Like, aren't they just clones fighting each other?
Yeah.
And so like the difference between Battlefield, where this is like a recreation of war, where people actually do die IRL, and this is a game where you're playing that recreation. Valorant is a bunch of clones doing some weird kind of study. Like the meta told in these two stories is completely different, but we react to them as if they're the exact same situation going on. I've always found that really intriguing about like, what do we bring with us to video games of our own understanding, and what is the game actually telling us is happening in game, and how much does that matter in our perspective of violence?
And for me, I'm big into like storyline. Like, I could tell you all about the like lore of League of Legends, and Valorant's kind of new, and I'm just starting to get into that lore. And I really think it's fascinating because essentially, from my understanding, please don't ever quote me on this because I'm just getting into it. But in terms of the lore for Valorant, you have these characters that essentially enter an alternate reality, I guess, and they got to defuse these bombs from blowing up, but yet they're going against themselves to defuse the bomb. And I really like the lore, and I don't think the lore is violent at all. And I think that's a whole nother conversation that we could have is playing violent video games, bad or good? Is reading the lore of violent video games, is that good or bad? Like, is that any different than watching Batman on the big screen? Or is it any different than reading a book like The Hunger Games? I mean, it's all violent content, massively consumed by society. But yeah, video games and video game lore gets this bad rep.
Yeah, I'm sure this will continue to come up, but let's let Splash say, what's your relationship with violence in video games before we move on?
Yeah, so my relationship with it is a lot different because I'm like, decent bit younger than all of you guys. But because my sort of relationship with it was like when I think Fortnite, like the big boom of that in like late 2018, I was like, I was like 10. That is like what I was always trying to like get into, and of course, Mom watched too much Good Morning America, and they told her that it's like
we just lost that sponsor. Good Morning America was going to be a sponsor on the podcast, but Splash just ruined it, man. Goodbye.
Yeah, and like they were one of those news outlets always preaching about how that was the real cause of all the violence, and not that the fact that people that need therapy in America can't actually get therapy. And so I was not allowed to play it until like 6 months ago, and by now like Fortnite's almost completely dead. So that's just sort of like my thing is like, for the longest time, anything with like a drop of blood or a gun in it was completely off the table.
Well, and again, what's hilarious is again the meta narrative being told in Fortnite, right? You might as well be shooting Nerf guns in Fortnite. Like, there's no more. And you drop out of a giant bus in the sky. Like, the suspension of disbelief is ridiculous that we bring to it. And so we've all kind of pointed out the kind of ridiculousness of video games, and then how some games do bring forward darker narratives and themes. But for some reason, regardless of the nuance and the deeper things being allowed, it seems that video games have become the scapegoat. We no longer really talk about violence in television. We don't talk about violence in movies. We don't talk about violence in our books that we read, like Danny said. But instead, it's always video games. And so I wonder if we have any perspective as to like why. Why do you think video games are the easiest thing that it seems to be to target? I don't even see people going after VR. So you can't even say that it's like the new thing because video games are so new and fresh. Even with VR being the new thing or social media being the new thing, it's still video games that comes up in every single conversation. Why do you think this is the easy scapegoat?
Well, I think there's a huge part in media. So one of my favorite classes in college was media literacy and understanding like the difference between good and bad sources, and then good sources sometimes using leading language. They're trying to like put thoughts into your brains. And there's been a lot of people that have gone into the media to like just target video games. And I'm not saying that's like the entire reason like why video games get a bad rep, but I think religion plays into it in such a way that essentially it's like a repeat of the satanic panic back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, right? And it brings about this sense of, well, my pastor said this about the video games my kid plays, so now I'm going to stop my kid from playing these video games because I don't want my kid to go to hell. I don't want my kid to be, won over by the devil. I don't want my kid to turn out to be this violent monster that's going to be the next school shooter. But in reality, there's no basis for school shootings and video games. And I think religion has just taken a strong hold on making sure that people aren't consuming this media because it takes away from their message of I'm always right. And I think they're afraid to admit that they are wrong about video games.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take it that, and I'll take it a step further too. Yeah, so the link between religion, specifically Western Christianity, I'll just talk for our culture, and trying to point the finger at video games as the thing, the reason why society is terrible, or violence in media in general, I think has to do with a couple of reasons. One, it's a lack of critical thinking of our own tradition. Because if you want to be completely honest, I'm reading through the Minor Prophets right now with my wife in devotionals, and you want some violence, read the Minor Prophets, read Joshua, 1st, 2nd Kings, 1st, 2nd Samuel. Like, you want some violence, read the Old Testament. God was a hothead till he had that kid, man, and it's telling him right now.
So what you're saying is, to stop being violent, everybody just needs to have kids.
Yeah, I don't know. I will say that like it is a lack of some awareness, I think, on what violent media does actually cause us to do, and maybe the force behind which we do it. Because again, if you look right back at the Bible, and a lot of the Old Testament narrative is super violent, but that's okay because God did it, right? They can't control video games unless they vilify them, because it seems like video games bypass God, when in reality, religion is such a big part of so many video games, right? It also usually paints religion in a bad light. So it's competition for a very specific brand of Christianity. So I think video games become easy because the people who are criticizing them don't play them. They fear what they don't know. And it also is being viewed as a voice in the ear of people they'd rather have the voice for. I think those are some of the reasons.
And I think it's also important to note that there was a couple people that did a study on the Bible. And if you were to make a movie from front to back of the Bible and make it like actually accurate on what the Bible says, that movie or that video game would be rated R or NA, because it'd be so violent and the amount of violent things that are in there.
Oh yeah, it's explicit.
And in New Testament is no different. Like, all you got to do is look at the Passion, right? The Passion of the Christ.
Yeah.
Like, I saw that one time, and I was like, "Yo, violence? What? We're worrying about, but it's okay, right? Because again, it was God, so it's okay as long as God's doing it. Then we can justify anything."
Right. Well, I mean, I just said what was like the worst example of video games was torture, and that's the book. That's the whole thing. The book. The story is a story of torture and death and resurrection. So we get to the good news, but the elevation, the peak of that violence, is what I described as being the one that gets video games banned. right? Yeah, it's explicit. There's no doubt about it.
But we also want to remember that sometimes banning a video game can be a good thing.
Well, there are times where it needs to be controlled within your own conversation. And we'll get to that here in a moment, but it is relationship building. It's understanding the why behind the decision that we're making. And video games are controlled for a reason, and they are controlled. we act like they aren't, but they are. Of course they are. Media is controlled, and we have different rankings and ratings that we put on things that are supposed to guide and steer the parental discretion for those under the age of 18, so that we're able to steer them in the right way with the games, the media, the stuff that we allow them to consume. And then once they reach 18, it's their decision, right? They get to decide what they play. And so then it's up to people like Checkpoint Church and like A Love Thy Nerd and like the other organizations out there, or pastors or churches, or just people, to remain in relationship with folks as they work through the media and consume it. That's why I really don't think anybody should be doing it alone. Continue to consume the stuff you want to consume, but make sure you're doing it in relationship with others. Whenever we kind of recluse ourselves and go off onto our own tangents, we can consume this violent media and it can start to work on us. But if we remain in relationship and conversation with it, then we'll be able to continue moving forward. So let's go ahead and talk. We can shift the topics a little bit for that. The big rating system that everybody knows about in the US and Canada is the ESRB. That's the Entertainment Software Rating Board. It is a self-regulatory organization, so that means it just keeps all of its decisions kind of in-house, but it does the work of assigning age ratings, content ratings, saying what exactly does contribute to the rating. So if you look at a video game and you see down in the bottom left or right corner, it says E, T, M, or AO, the very rarely seen AO there. They all have different expectations by which they limit things.
Which is just a minor nitpick. You actually won't see AO on a box because Nintendo, PlayStation, and Xbox, they don't allow AO games on their system. So you actually you'll never see that on a video game box.
But you can't see it for PC though.
You can see it for PC, correct?
Yeah.
Right.
So, and I think it's also important to note that they don't govern who can and can't buy those video games. It's the government that does that. And I don't believe there's a federal law that states that, a 15-year-old can buy a mature game. I think that's all left up to the state's decision. So every state handles that differently.
I don't know of any states that actually have laws in place for that.
Oh, Illinois does.
Are there?
You can't buy a mature game unless you're 17. You have to provide an ID for that.
Or unless you have your parents with you. So.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
I remember whenever I was growing up, it was always kind of the like peek over the shoulder. If you were buying like an M game and you were like noticeably under the age of 17 or whatever, and they would be like, "Who's this for?" And they would like look behind you and you'd be like standing behind your mom, like, "Not me, it's somebody else here. I'm not buying this game.
Yeah.
I don't want to play this game. I don't even like this." So there was kind of that like weird, even if it was unstated or unregulated, it set a expectation and it set kind of an understanding between the seller of the game and the consumer of the game. So I think whether or not there was laws or whether it differentiates between states, there was definitely an expectation set, a kind of cultural normative experience by this ESRB rating. And there are a couple of things that they list on their website that I'll link in the description of this podcast as long as I remember to do. But if I don't, it's esrb.org/ratings guide, ratings-guide / But the things that they list are alcohol, blood, cartoon violence, crude humor, fantasy violence, animated blood and gore, comic mischief, drug reference, intense violence. There's it starts to get more and more specific from there, but that's just a quick list, including violence and sexual content and gambling, themes, strong lyrics, suggestive themes. There's all sorts of things that they get into. Those are probably things you'll start to end up seeing in that little box of what you can expect from this game and what it's there for. And so maybe we should talk about that. What does it look like to contain these games? If we're all in agreement that they need to have some kind of expectation attached to them, and we may not be, but not every game is meant for every person, whether it might be age or whether it might be trauma or whether it might be things that might trigger us. Not every game is meant for every person. So we have to have some way to regulate that either within our own selves or whether it be a organization such as the ESRB that helps us to regulate those things. So what does that look like to pick the game that is for us?
I think the rating system is good. I think it helps with exactly what you just said, helps us give sort of an expectation of what things might be like. Whether or not I think there ought to be laws, like hard, fast laws in place on you absolutely cannot purchase this unless you are of such age, like we have on alcohol and cigarettes. Like we know those things have detrimental effects, and we also know that at a certain point you get to choose whether or not you want to accept those risks, right? I'm not sure if media necessarily needs that. That said, humans have been notorious in not doing the best things for us without a little bit of prompting. Interesting with the ERSB is that unlike the movie ratings, which have subtly shifted over time, like the ratings are the same, but what's included within a particular rating has shifted a little bit. I watched a PG-13 movie from the 80s the other day and was like, whoa, that was in a PG-13 movie? I couldn't believe it. But that has not seemed to be the case with video games. That rating system has stayed pretty consistent, and I think it's because we recognize that unlike movies for the most part, video games can trick us with their visual more than, say, a movie. If I'm going to see a Friday the 13th movie, I kind of know what that's going to be. However, a video game can look way different than we expect. It Takes Two is a great example of this. That game is, I think that's M. That game might be M. If it's not, it's up there. It's high.
It's T. It Takes Two is a T, yeah.
Is it only a T?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe it's because I'm playing with my 9-year-old. It seems higher. But
I'm
there you go.
Say, I mean, yeah,
but there are things in there. There are things in there that, like, T is a pretty wide range, right? And but I'm playing through it with my 9-year-old, which I'm like is okay. We've had some conversations around that, but like if you just go based on the visual and the art style and all of that, it can be deceptive. And I could walk by my child playing that game and see it and go, oh, that looks okay, and never know. Yeah. I couldn't walk by my kid watching Friday the 13th and be like, "Oh, that looks okay."
Yeah. No. Can I ask a question about that? I mean, you're a parent, right? Mm-hmm. And so you're playing this video game. Let's say you're playing a video game with your 9-year-old, and all of a sudden there is this clip, the scene, or there's this character that does something that is like really far out there. For example, I'm not going to give any examples, trying to keep this family friendly, but and your kid really loves this game and you love spending time with your kid playing this video game. Do you stop playing that video game altogether with your kid, or do you sit down and have a chit chat about, like, this happened in the video game, what do you think, what are your thoughts, how are you processing this, or are you trying to shield them?
Well, for me personally, I already go into a game knowing fairly well what my limit is on that with him. I mean, I'm not gonna, like, I guess I did know that It Takes Two is a T, or else I wouldn't have played it. I would never have sat down and played an M. It just feels like that sometimes when they say something. I'm like, wow, that's in a T. Okay. So like I would not likely find myself in a situation that you just described, simply because I'm pretty proactive in protecting him from that stuff. Now, that's maybe down the road in a little bit when he's 12 or 13 and the area starts to gray a little bit more on what's available. I don't know whether I would just stop playing altogether, but if something came up that was that objectionable, it would be very unlikely for me to continue playing with him, no matter how much he likes it. He was not. I have a real big problem with him playing Roblox right now, simply because I can't regulate it nearly as much as I'd like. And he finds himself sometimes playing games that for a 9-year-old, I'm like, I'm not sure I want you doing those things in a game right now. It's harder to regulate his interaction with strangers on that, which is why I also keep his ability to play Minecraft in social settings very restricted. Right now, I'm actually less concerned with the types of things he'll find in the game and more concerned with the types of people he'll find in games right now.
Yeah, that's a great
follow-up question. I've talked to parents. I'm a big advocate of esports, and like the number one concern I see all the time is I don't want my kids playing with strangers on the internet. And I tell them not to worry, because the likelihood of your kid getting involved with a stranger in a inappropriate way is very unlikely. I mean, it happens, but it's very unlikely. And so, what are your thought process on that?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say absolutely not. Oh, okay. And here's why. Because I take digital community so seriously, and I feel it's as real as in-person community, and even more dangerous in some situations, because my kids know stranger danger. right? Outside, they know a strange person walks up to me, I'm not supposed to talk to them because this could go badly. On the internet, there's no barrier there. They don't see this person. It's just a digital avatar. And now a stranger who I have not vetted, who I do not know, who may or may not align with my personal life philosophy is chirping into my son's very impressionable ears. No way.
Okay.
That actually, and so again, I'm more concerned about the people they meet online because the barrier is down. It's be the same. My son meeting a stranger in Roblox and talking to them in a conversation is no different than if a stranger walked up to my kid with a puppy in a park and said, "Hey, do you want to come see my car?"
No, I understand that. I struggle to understand like a parent's view from this, and I'm not a parent, so I can't speak to that. But like for me, I grew up really conservative, and like the only outlet I ever had was talking to strangers on the internet. So I see this as a positive thing, and I know it can get very negative very fast. And what is your advice to parents who have kids that want to be online? I mean, at what age do you think it's okay to start talking to strangers, building that online community that we have at Checkpoint, right? I mean, it's an online community. I've never met any of these people online. And so would you want your kid to be involved with Checkpoint at a certain point, or is that a no-go because they're strangers online?
No, I'm a part of this community, so I am vetting the community, right? If it's a thing that I'm a part of, I can make a better informed decision. This isn't even the conversation we're supposed to be having, but it's okay.
All right.
No, it's fine. For my friend, my son has a lot of friends who have unfettered access to the internet and gaming communities. People are going to do what they do, however they feel safe. I have seen enough in my life and I've been a part of enough in my life that I'd like to give him a little more time to understand how to manage his environment before he does that. He's 9. So maybe when he's a little bit older, in a few years, when, you know, he needs some of that interaction more, then yeah. But as a parent, and this is not a position I held when I was younger, but as a parent, I understand that we are there primarily to guide them to make good decisions, not to give in to whatever whim it is that they feel like they want and need. Yes, he needs social interaction. Yes, he may not get it all in all the ways that he wants. He will eventually. And hopefully by then, he will have been guided in a way to know what's a good thing and what's a bad thing. 9 years old, he's old enough to do a lot of things, but he's not old enough for strangers to have access to him where I think he's going to make wise decisions most of the time.
Well, and let's also be clear and understand that there is a responsibility as a parent. There's also a legal liability.
Yes.
And it's important to note what companies are shirking off legal liability for.
Mm-hmm.
So Discord,
100%.
I'm sure Fortnite, I'm sure Roblox, I'm sure Minecraft, any service that provides online services, your child is supposed to be 13.
Yep.
If your child is not 13, they are online against the liability, not illegally, against the liability of the organization. So if your 10, 11, 12-year-old is online and is abused in a tragedy, in a traumatic scenario, then Epic Games claims no responsibility because you were informed that your child needed to be 13 years old.
And so that's why Twitch will remove your channel, no questions asked, if you have a kid on there under the age of 13 unsupervised. Your channel just no longer exists.
It's got to be supervised. It's got to be controlled. It's got to be, I mean, really, they don't want YouTube for a while there even pulled the plug on that entirely. They made YouTube Kids. And if your program wasn't labeled as a YouTube Kids show, you couldn't even have a kid present. They tried to shut down family channels because there's nasty stuff happening. But regardless of the nasty stuff, you have to realize these umbrella corps, these big corporations, they have legal liability for certain things. And so they have the red tape that they need. And so it's our responsibility as parents to look at that red tape and say, if they set this up, then maybe I need to give this a second look. And so for anybody that might be listening to this podcast, if we think whoever in Checkpoint Church or in our ancillary people that we're reaching, they might be parents and they might be hearing this for the first time. So that's what we're really providing here is a reminder of, if you're concerned about violence in video games enough to listen to this podcast because if you're a child, just know that that's also a huge danger. Whether or not the strangers online are dangerous, Twitch, Discord, Roblox, all these companies think that it's dangerous enough that they don't want to cover your 12-year-old.
Well, on the topic of violence and the ERSB, that gets us right back to why it's the same mentality for why I appreciate having these labels when trying to figure out something for my kid. Like when I have let my son play things on Game Pass, I make sure that the rating is under a certain level because he is not emotionally or intellectually equipped to deal with some things yet. He will be eventually. And if he is exposed to something and he has a question, I will always talk with him about it at his a level that's appropriate for a 9-year-old, because he doesn't need to be exposed to everything fully yet. Some people will be like, oh, well, you're lying to your kid. Yeah, I guess we do it all the time as parents because we recognize that intellectually and emotionally, there are gates that we pass through, things that I am emotionally and intellectually equipped to deal with as a 44-year-old are not the same things that I could never have dealt with most of these things as a 9-year-old. So he doesn't need to know what I know about it. He needs to know what he needs to know about it. And with those ratings, it gives me a better glimpse of saying, okay, he is less likely to run into something that's going to be extremely problematic for his emotional health.
No, Splashverse, I had a question. You're the youngest of us here. You're under 18, I think.
I'm 14. Yeah.
14. Okay, yeah. How are your parents handling video games and violence? And do you have rules that you have to follow, or do they not even know that you play video games?
All right. So until my birthday this year, I was not allowed to play rated M games. That changed recently. Now I can pretty much play whatever the heck I want to, given some certain restrictions. But yeah, for that's like I was talking about with Fortnite. For the longest time, is like guns, blood, the sex, all was a no-go. I don't think one set of rules works as like a blanket with like all kids. Everybody is different. Everybody is emotionally at a different point in their life at every individual age. And so I feel like, well, for one, I feel like once you start middle school, there's a lot of things that you're going to be seeing and hearing anyway. That's sort of my philosophy on it, is that like once you start middle school, most rated T games should be okay with some. There are some games that are up there, but I feel like that's just my opinion on that.
You ever gotten in any trouble because you played a game you weren't supposed to?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
I'm pretty sure that's true for all of us.
I was going to say, I think it's true for all of us.
That happened a lot.
No, I think you hit on a really great point there, Splash. Of it is really all about being involved. I think that's probably the crux of the issue for me, is that you really can't put a blanket on all video games, because even if you try and compare M games to other M games, you're just going to have an unfair expectation. It just doesn't work to try and set up this is true for all this game. This is true for all this rating. The gamut is too wide. There's too many things to consider. And so it's best to have an active involvement in whatever you're consuming. So I'll point out a couple resources that I know of right off the top of my head, and that is Know Thy Gamer by Drew Dixon. That is a book written by one of the Love Thy Nerd folks. I think now he is stepping back from Love Thy Nerd, but I'll shout out his book because that's a guide, kind of a 101 guide for a parent that wants to enter into involvement into video games with their children, but isn't quite sure how to even take the lead. Taming Gaming by Andy Robertson. I think that's actually also a podcast. I'm not 100% sure, but he was also on a Love Thy Nerd thing. And that's just another excellent resource to check out just to start the relationship. And then kind of like the ESRB, there is a commonsensemedia.com. I think it is. It might be .org. I'm not sure. But Common Sense Media is something I've known about for years and years, where it's basically a Christian review source. So take with it what you will. Some of you listening may be a Christian. Some of you may not. But just know that Common Sense Media, hopefully, is a place to start. It's not a place to come up with every answer. But if you're looking for keywords, if you're looking for cues or things that might be like, maybe not, then treat it kind of like Rotten Tomatoes and know that the reviewers may be full of it, but they also might have something to provide, some kind of guidance.
It is .org, by the way.
.org. There you go. Yeah, so Common Sense Media. Those are just some places to start.
I want to say something about Common Sense Media real quick. They allow anybody to post a review on a game, so take everything on there with a grain of salt. And maybe I think they have some sort of system where they recognize, where they sort of try and verify if people actually know what they're talking about. So look for I don't know what it's called, but look for that sort of symbol.
Yeah. And again, the best answer is always to be involved with it yourself, to really do the work to negotiate with it. And at this point, I'm not even really talking to just parents. I'm talking about people. There are some organizations out there that are working on this kind of thing, but it's just reality that video games are going to have things that are going to trigger trauma. There are people that are suffering with PTSD that things are going to flare up whenever they're playing certain experiences. The more and more visceral that video games get, especially with VR, as we continue to work into immersion, people are going to start experiencing inexplicable side effects. And so being able to have a way to even learn more about video games and what to expect from them is going to be really helpful for people wanting to enter into that. I mean, I know a lot of people in my field, right? I'm a pastor. I work with a lot of Christians. I work with a lot of ex-evangelicals, fundamentalists, people that have moved out of the fundamentalist church into a more progressive church movement. There are going to be games out there that are going to be people that have experiences that are wrestling through a previous ex-evangelical deconstruction that may flag something for you. And even for me, I've got to be aware of like what games are out there that are doing that I need to make sure that I point people's direction to say, hey, if you're going to play that game, I think that's great. That deals with some really heavy LGBTQIA plus issues and trauma that they experience. You might be dealing with that thing too, and it might not be right for you to experience this right now. You need to be in your best possible headspace. There are games like Omori. Omori's rated M, right? But it's a very different M game, right? We're talking about suicide. We're talking about hikikomori reclusion.
Oh, spoiler.
we're talking about some really, really dark themes. And so Halo is also rated M. Totally different experience. You just got to be aware of like, hey, I struggle with depression and anxiety and have had suicidal tendencies. Probably not going to play Omori. Whereas Halo, probably a fine game for you to play. It's just a different experience.
Can I go on a quick tangent about Halo? Can I go on a quick tangent about Halo? I do not think that series should be rated M. I think because like Valorant is rated T. Yeah. I think objectively Halo is less violent than Valorant is, or at least most of them anyway. I think a lot of the problem is, and actually they did this recently with Infinite, where a lot of the problems with like the older Halos, it was the campaigns, and they would cuss in the campaigns, and that would give them up to M. There's just like,
well, but Valorant has a cuss word in pretty much every match. Like, not only do the players that you're communicating with cuss at you so much because you messed up. Sorry, I'm trying to keep it family friendly. But like the characters themselves, like have their own dialogue. I've heard countless words from the characters and their own like internal dialogue, like just cussing out other characters in the game. Like, and to your point, like Halo Reach, like I think there was like maybe 3 cuss words in that entire campaign, and it is by far the best Halo Reach or Halo campaign you'll ever play. So
by far the best Halo Reach you will ever play.
I think you've entered into a great point of nuance, right? The reality that I was trying to make there is that game ratings do the best they can, and they enter in a great launching point. But you still need to do the research. You still need to nose the grindstone, learn more about why is this getting the rating that it's getting. With how gaming is right now, even if you don't want to play the game, any game that comes out, type in this game, let's play on YouTube. You're gonna find it. Type it in on Twitch. Somebody's live streaming it. Go and experience it for yourself. Watch an hour or two. See what you think. You don't even have to buy a console, but just do the work of experiencing it and learn if this game is right for you, if it's wrong for you, or what it might do for you. But I think that is a great stopping point for us to get to our mid-show break before we come back for some games and our top 3 lists for this episode. So I'm going to cut away to a quick break, and we'll be back in just a second. Welcome back to the Level 2 Podcast, and we are here with our top 3 list. By the way, if you want more conversation about video games and violence, we would love to have potentially a part 2 to this conversation. Let us know what you think. Respond to this podcast. Engage in the conversation with us on Twitch or wherever you might be watching this. Let us know that you want more, and we'll bring it back for a future conversation, because there's always going to be more. There's always going to be progress. There's always going to be things to discuss with this, but I think we've done a great job of exploring the initial nuance and all that stuff. But with that, I wanted to really turn this conversation on its head and have us each present our top 3 games in no particular order that have no violence in them. Top 3 games without a shred of violence. The shtick here is that video games are so violent, right? That's the meme. They're not. They're not all violent. There are tons of games without violence. In fact, that I am a very non-violent gamer myself, and I had a tough time coming up with 3 because I had so many that I wanted to put on this list.
But does like a game like Fall Guys, does that count as violence?
Yeah, what are we qualifying as violence?
I would say Fall Guys is not violent. It might even be, oh, what's this? Another echo of our conversation on nuance. So you might even just have to say, what is violence for yourself? For me, I chose to say violence is literally, there is no weaponry. There's no there's no creatures dying. There's no monsters dying. If people die, it's by natural causes. That was my argument in the game. And even then, my third game may beat that caveat because it could be argued that it's not natural. But anyway, we'll get into our top 3 games.
I wrestled with that very question, like, what's violent? Right? What is violence? Again, I go back to Super Mario Brothers. Is that an inherently violent game? Yeah, it is, because I mean, it has violence in it. There's lots of death going on and caused by the player, especially. So the 3 I came up with, I think, fall under this category. Tetris, love Tetris, unless you consider block destruction violence. Forza, like Forza Horizon 5. I've been playing that a lot lately. And while you can hit other cars, it's usually not intentional. Like, it's not really a strategy you should be employing, but there's no, I just don't view that as a game with violence. And Hardball 95, it's an old baseball game from 1995. Loved that game. Spent so many hours playing that game as a teenager with my friends. So those are my top 3 without violence.
Yeah, I think I've got 3. Okay, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and The Sims, specifically the newest one, because that's the only one I've played. And I had it. Where did it go? Oh, Fall Guys.
It's breaking my heart that you've not played the original Sims. Man, I don't know where I would be without those cheat codes and all that stuff in original Sims. Oh, so good.
I don't think I've ever played Sims.
Oh, you're killing me. Those were like one of my most played games, because I had a PS2 and a GameCube growing up.
I would try it, but I don't know how to even go about doing that.
I wouldn't.
See,
I love them, and I probably wouldn't play them again.
So I would question whether or not Mario Kart is violent or not.
No, it's got to be on the table. It's got to be on the table, because I don't have a third one.
I'm gonna say Mario Kart is not violent because nobody is dying.
But you don't have to die for it. I can punch you in the face and you're not dead. That's violent.
I feel like that should be a meme.
You hit me with one of those red shells. Trust me, I want to do violence.
That's true. That may not even be violence in the video game, but it is a video game that leads to violence. Yeah, that could be said of Mario Party too.
Right. Oh, Mario Party has broken so many friendships.
No, Mario Party is absolutely a game with violence.
I think my 3 video games, and I know I'm on that gray line here, is Mario Kart, or is really good, but you got the vehicle destroying. Portal is a mostly non-violent game until you get to the end. Yeah, and then I couldn't come up with a third one, so just Fall Guys, I guess.
Portal's a good one.
I realized when asking this question, I'm like, oh my God, I don't play any non-violent video games. Like, by your definition, League of Legends is a violent video game.
Oh,
absolutely.
And I'm like
that's one that's violent and also leads to violence. That's a both and. Yeah.
I don't know. I just struggled.
It just leads to swear words.
Maybe that can be Jason Moore's next book. Both and.
Both and.
Violent games that lead to violence.
Yeah, my top 3 games. This was, like I said, you guys need to come to me if you want non-violent games, because I had trouble coming up with just a few. I had so many, but I had Harvest Moon and Wonderful Life. You could really put any of the Harvest Moon games. Stardew, I even thought about including, but I didn't, because you slay monsters in the mines. So I was like, that's violence. This is Harvest Moon. Wonderful Life has no violence in it. There is a character that dies, but it's natural causes. Animal Crossing, any of them, that could fill all 3 as well. I'm going to do New Horizons just because that's the newest one. And then a game called Before Your Eyes. It's just a really cool game if you've never played it. It's played with the webcam. It's an indie game. It's probably on sale on most consoles now, but I think I got it off Itch.io whenever I first bought it. And your webcam is turned on. It measures your eyes, and when you blink, it goes to the next scene. And so it tells a story of you trying to hold your eyes open and not blink so you can get to the next scene to make more decisions and choices. It's so good, such a good game, powerful storytelling, and no violence. And pretty much
such a cool idea.
It's a really cool idea. It's a great game. So that'll, at the very least, that'll be a recommendation that people can hopefully check out if they haven't before.
So I didn't have trouble finding non-violent games. I had trouble finding non-violent games that I enjoyed.
Interesting.
Some of those that you mentioned, those were on my list of non-violent games, but I tend to think those games suck. So
they're just not for you.
They're not my kind of game. I guess I'm a violent gamer. I don't know.
Well, so what about Portal?
I loved Portal.
Okay,
I liked Portal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In my opinion, the first one's better than the second one, but the first one took me like 2 hours to get through, and I was like, wow, okay, $20 down the drain.
It's interesting if you go on Twitch and you start looking at streamers and seeing what people are streaming. For the most part, it's going to be streaming violent video games. That's what people stream. I think that there is a offset that's happening in video gaming where we're starting to see more and more mobile gamers. And this has been over the past couple of years where mobile games have kind of taken over the world because everybody really, really globally has at least some access to even cheap phones that are able to play more and more games nowadays. And so what we're finding is that the phone market is continuing to increase the rate of video gamers. So we feel like console gamers are like master race, PC master race gamers. But the truth is like, no, it's phone gamers that are taking over. And typically phone games lean towards puzzles, and puzzles most of the time, like Tetris, are non-violent. And so I'm really interested to see if we see a turn on Twitch and on these platforms where people are playing games and they're streaming games. We steer away from violence as the rate of people playing these non-violent games increases. But that's something that we'll see. We'll have to keep it.
But I also think it's interesting that like when the touch screen, the original iPhone, like that was like the first touchscreen phone came out. Like nobody knew what to do with it. So you had all these stupid apps on your phone, or like you could chug a beer and you tip the phone sideways and the beer would like slowly go down, or you could have a lighter on your phone, and now like we're like what, just past the 10-year mark of the iPhone, and like the technology has just exploded. Like you went from having a lighter on your phone to now you can actually light something with your phone.
Yeah, well, I'm playing Game Pass games right now. I'm doing xCloud on my phone. So like I don't play games anymore really on my consoles. I play them on my phone because I have a baby. And so that's my life, is like I had the phone that I played Temple Run on, and now I'm playing
Temple Run.
And now I'm playing like the latest whatever off of Game Pass. So yeah, it's pretty insane how far we've come for sure.
How is that, by the way? I haven't gotten the chance to try xCloud before.
xCloud, it's very impressive. If you got the good internet connection, it's incredible. I do an Xbox One controller that I've got connected to my phone. I have the clip. I hold it in front of me. Easy peasy. Now that I have the Steam Deck, I think things are going to change a little bit. But I think that as far as without a Steam Deck, without one to drop all the Buku Dolores on that hunk of equipment, you are going to have a just fine experience with a $60 controller and whatever phone you're rocking. Yeah, it's impressive. More impressive than the Switch cloud gaming so far, which I haven't played much of that, but I've tried it. I tried it with what was the Control? I tried it with Control. Yeah.
Control, it's so bad.
Yeah, it just didn't work. All right, well, let's get into our game to close out this show. So we end each of these shows with Nerd of the Month. This is a monthly podcast, so we do have a different nerd each month. And this is just some fictional character. We're going to do a Guess Who style game where we'll let level 2 members take one question at a time. Everybody gets to ask one question and give one guess every single time they get to go. And we'll just go kind of a round robin style. So you get to ask one question. It can be any question. It has to be yes or no. And then you get to give one guess. So we'll start with you.
Okay. Are they from a video game?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Then we're up to Yeet. Oh, do you want to give a guess? Yeah. If you want to try. Take a shot in the dark.
I got it.
All right, Yeet.
Yeet. It's your turn.
Cool. Are they part of the Mario franchise?
They are not.
Are they human?
Yeah. Yes, they are human.
No clue.
Are they a playable character in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate?
No. No, they are not in Smash.
No. Oh. Okay.
Is their costume black or dark?
No, not really.
Oh, okay. Is it Robin?
No, not Robin.
I was gonna say Batman, but then you said couple.
Do they identify as male?
Yes.
Is it a Nintendo video game?
I'm gonna make an addendum on these. They are from a video game, as in they are in a video game. And yes, you can play this game on a Nintendo console.
So they're not a original. Okay, so it's
right.
Not
they're not a Nintendo character, nor are they a video game character, but they are in video games.
Okay.
Okay.
Is it God?
I said, never mind. We do not have time.
Sorry, I think it went out of turn there. I think it's on Splash Force.
Oh, is it my turn?
I think
well,
so.
You asked, is it from Nintendo? I explained the situation. So you can either ask, is it God? And that could be your guess. And then you could ask a question if you want to.
Oh, okay. My bad. I'm sorry. I didn't realize it was my turn. I can't think of any questions right now. But is their suit or costume red?
No.
Oh, okay. Is it Lex Luthor? I don't know. I can't think of anything with superheroes.
It is not Lex.
Is it a man based on a real life person?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Are they originally from a Disney-owned property?
Oh, what an interesting question. yeah, they are.
Yeah, yes, they are.
But
Okay.
you can say that about anything now. Pretty much like 90% of the content we consume is Disney.
It narrows it down a little bit.
It does.
A little bit. Are they from the Star Wars universe?
No.
Okay. Is it? Yeah. Stain, just go. I can't.
Is he
think.
from the Marvel universe?
Yes.
Thor.
No.
Is it Tony Stark?
No.
Or do I get to ask a question as well?
You do. If you want to ask a question,
Yeah.
that was just your guess.
Okay.
Well,
Do they have superpowers?
yeah.
Okay.
Are they one of the original Avengers?
Original? I got to Google.
Ooh.
The first 6 from the first movie. That's what we're.
Oh, okay. That's what you mean?
Original.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they're in the first movie. Is it?
I thought you meant like the comics.
Oh no. That's too far back for me. I'm not that old. Is it the Hulk?
It is the Hulk. Congratulations to
Oh!
Danny. Danny G got the dub on this one. Got the nerd of the month. Congratulations.
We would
Very
never
exciting.
have been able to do that without Splash asking about the Disney IP.
That was a really good question. That was a very good question. And I racked my brain. I also may have led you guys astray with, you asked, is his costume dark? And I was like, I think he wears khakis. I'm
They're
99%
blue.
sure.
They're like blue or black pants. Yeah.
But they might be black
depends
pants. They might be
I've
purple even. I feel like they were purple at one point.
I've seen Bruce in.
I think they're
in
typically
jeans.
purple in like the. Yeah, I think they're typically like purple in the comics.
Yeah, I think he was bright green with purple pants because those are complementary colors. I'm
Yes.
like 99% sure. And then I was like,
believe you're
Yeah.
is purple a dark color? Is he? Because he's bright green. Does that? So yeah, I just said.
Ask the bishop. They'll tell you.
Well, so I asked that question because I'm like, how do I ask about because like most superheroes, most characters wear this like elaborate costume or elaborate something, right? But like I didn't want to like say something that would be like super awkward, and so I'm like, costume. That's a good word.
Well, this is
So-
one character that like barely has a costume, so of
Yeah.
course that would be the question you ask.
Yeah.
But yes, I appreciate having all of you on here. Let's take some time here at the end. If you have anything that you would like to shout out, let's go one by one and shout out any project you might be working on, or if you stream, where do you stream? Any of that information. Let's go ahead and go one by one. We'll go in the order that you've got. We'll start with Stain here.
Yeah, I stream from time to time over at twitch.tv/stainedglassrebel. And I'm also working with my conference on planting a digital church geared toward folks who have some semblance of traditional in-person church. So very different than what's going on here, but a lot of the same community building elements will be present.
Danny, how about yourself?
Yes, I don't have a lot of online content right now. I'm actually getting myself going on that. You can find me on Behance at Danny G. That's DANIIG. And then on Instagram, I just started my Instagram account and I've already got 4 followers. Yay me, hitting the big numbers, at Timo's Eater, and that's pretty much it.
All right, Splash.
You can follow me on Twitter at SplashForce1, and that's all I got. Also, join Checkpoint Church. I don't know if we have a custom link yet, but go to twitch.tv and search Checkpoint Church in the search bar.
There we go. Yep, absolutely. Always check out Checkpoint Church, church for nerds, geeks, and gamers. I'm Nerd Pastor Nate, the pastor there. These are all level 2 members. That means that they have decided to serve alongside the mission of this digital church online. And this is the Level 2 Podcast, a monthly podcast where we are airing all of these level 2 members based around a central topic and theme. I want to thank again Stained Glass for being here, Yeet the Boots for being here, Splash Force for being here. With that, we're going to do our sign off, starting with Stain.
God loves you.
We love you.
You matter.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Level 2 Podcast. We hope that you enjoyed the show and will consider letting us know what you think of the show in your favorite podcast app with a 5-star rating. Bye-bye.